On today's How I Got My Start in Finance, Barbara Young sits down with Real Vision's Grant Williams to discuss the beginning of her career in the 1980s. Known as the Golden Girl of West Coast private banking, she talks about the challenges she overcame on her road to success.
Barbara, thank you for taking the time to come and chat with me.
Absolutely, it's a
It's
pleasure.
very, very kind of you. I know it's a busy conference here at the Tiger 21 event in Boca, but I thought it was a great chance for you and I to sit and talk and walk through your career, because it's an interesting story, and you're one of a minority in the finance industry. Women
Unfortunately,
are
that's
underrepresented.
true.
Yeah, exactly right. So I'd love to, as I love to do with people, take you back to the beginning and talk about how you got into finance, whether it was an itch that you wanted to scratch when you were a kid, or you just kind of found your way into it.
Oh, it was very definitely something I fell into. I came out of college being what was deemed to be overeducated and couldn't type. So I had a difficult time finding a job, and banking looked appealing because I thought they worked 10 to 3, since that was banking hours
Right.
back in the day. And I got a job working at a bank thinking that I really wanted to work with autistic children. So it was a really far cry from what I thought I would be doing. But once you got on a path of actually being employed, it was very difficult to give up a paycheck and go back and do something else. And then I realized I really wanted to be a lawyer, but back in that time, it was not common for women to be going to law school. So I really wanted my husband to go to law school. And he was not so thrilled about the thought of going to law school. So I stayed working in banking, but I did get a master's in law, thinking that I would somehow migrate into that. I progressed so rapidly in the banking situation that it became even harder to leave and start something else. So then I decided I'd get an MBA, and that propelled me even further. And I happened to be deemed a golden girl, and just progressed very rapidly, and started actually the private bank at the institution I was with, which was unknown at the time, especially on the West Coast, very different from the East Coast. And that just propelled me. I just kind of got into that groove and never came out of it.
So back then, what was private? Now, what are we talking here? What time frame are we talking here?
I started in the 70s, so
this
it's
but private
decades
banking,
ago.
but private banking was, I guess, you got into the private banking in the late 70s.
Yes.
So what was it like back then? Because obviously, we all kind of have a sense of it today, but it was very different.
It was very different, and it was very different from the East Coast. The East Coast, I think, viewed private banking more as it is today, where it was a lot of investment and concierge-type services. On the West Coast, it was really helping wealthy individuals finance their investments. And so I was working with people that were, being in California, wealth was generated at that time primarily from real estate. So I was working with a lot of real estate investors and developers, and had a very great aptitude for real estate. I loved it. I learned it very quickly, and worked with a lot of the great real estate folks in California. And then in the 80s, it turned to the venture capitalists, not so much the entrepreneurs, but the capitalists themselves. So I had a really strong background in both real estate and in venture capital, not so much in public equities. So it was a very different type of private banking. It was really financing the investments of the wealthy, which meant I was reviewing their financial statements and their income tax returns, their trust documents, because I was doing almost like a private equity type of investigation of their financial background. So it was a very different type of private bank than it is today.
But the early 80s, obviously 80, 91, 82, was a fantastic time to be looking to buy real estate.
Oh, it was fabulous, yes, yes.
I mean, take us back to that time, because obviously with today's real estate market all across the world, it's really hard to imagine depressed real estate prices and...
Well, in interest rates, if you recall,
Yeah, of
back
course.
then were 16, 17%. I mean, that's very hard for people to remember, too. It was really outrageous. But back then, real estate was booming, and in San Francisco, it was especially booming, and there was a lot of redevelopment, a lot of building going on, both in new office buildings, a lot of rehab of existing buildings, and a lot of development going on in housing, both in downtown San Francisco and in the outlying areas. And it was not yet the boom of Silicon Valley. It hadn't really started picking up there, but the housing boom was still going on quite strongly, very near into San Francisco. And so I was working with a lot of developers and a lot of individuals that were just buying properties and refurbishing them and holding them for their own book or flipping them. And it was a time there, and a lot of people that were buying properties and doing work-live space. I mean, that was very popular back in that time. So it was a real amalgamation of different types of real estate, but everything was going up. And it was a time that that banks were, or at least most of the major institutions, were making a transition from having all of the lending done in the branches. If you can remember that far back, all of the decision-making and the lending was done in the local branches. And they were starting to centralize it. So they would have a commercial group and a corporate group and a real estate group. And so at the institution I was with, they were starting to centralize that so that all of the developer loans were being centralized into the real estate industries group. So I was charged with getting a lot of these real estate developers to make that transition, which they did kicking and screaming.
Sure.
They knew that they could have a lot more flexibility if they were dealing in the branches than if they were dealing in the head office.
For Barbara Young, falling into finance turned into rapid career advancement in private banking. For Real Vision, I'm Justine Underhill.